Okairi is a place where Nikkei LGBTQ plus individuals, families, and allies can connect, build, learn, and really organize with one another to really bring change within the Japanese American community as well as the greater society. Mia Yamamoto is a criminal defense attorney and legal community activist. Melvin Fujikawa, he is currently working as a pastoral counselor at Evergreen Baptist Church of Los Angeles, a church he worked at for 10 years before he came out of the closet in 2010. Bill Tashima is a 69-year-old gay sansei, originally from Ohio, now happily married in Fall City, Washington, who likes to volunteer in the JA community. And then we have Gary Hayashi, who does marriage and family therapy in South Pasadena, sings with the Gay Men's Chorus of LA and Los Angeles. And then we have Barney Cheng, who is an award-winning writer-director who works on feature films, episodic television, and documentaries. And then we have Marsha Izumi, who is one of the founders of Okairi, and I'm going to say a loving parent to many Nikkei LGBTQ plus individuals, families, and allies. Coming out definitely was a very big topic that each of you spoke about at length in your interviews. Now, because LGBTQ topics and issues and conversations have become much more common in the mainstream media, there seems to be a lot of pressure on young people to come out. Each of you really had a lot of time to reflect on what, quote, being in the closet meant for you, and how you spent that time, right? And how it has led to who you are today. So to no one in particular, anybody who has the courage to talk first, what impact do you think your own coming out process have, not just on your LGBTQ plus identity, but also all of your other identities, right? Including your Japanese American identity, including maybe your Christian identity, maybe including, being a sibling to somebody, right? So how did that process impact you today?
I want to say that when I listened to everybody's stories, and when I went home and I started editing all the videos, it just reminded me of the difficult journey of coming out, how difficult it was at the time. And what stood out for me was everyone's journey was so different. It was difficult in their own ways.
One thing that I've learned through this process is just gaining a really deep respect for my fellow panelists and being inspired by them. And as Barney said, everybody's journey is different. It's individual. Coming out, there's no one coming out story. It's not like, here today, gay tomorrow. It's kind of, it differs with everyone. For me, for example, it was a journey of first coming out to myself, first admitting to myself that I was gay, and then slowly coming out to some friends. And then it works out where you come out to coworkers or to the public, and it's not easy. I think that there's a misconception that because gay and lesbian finally have achieved the rights that they deserve, that are theirs, and because there's more media coverage and we appear everywhere, that coming out should be easy. But I always think, it's never easy for a young person to come out and say that I'm different. The only difference today from my day is that someone coming out today doesn't have to feel alone. That hopefully, whether we're role models or not, the fact is there's people like us and other people and organizations who care.
The closet was, it was hard, and it was difficult, but sort of like you started out, at the beginning, we have to respect, it's a journey. It's a journey in the closet, and coming out is not a one-time deal. Coming out is a process, and we come out again and again and again. It just sort of snowballs, because I didn't even know how much didn't come out, because it's not just about sexual orientation. It's all connected, right? So all of that, I'm still coming out 10 years later. I discover things about being gay now that I totally didn't think about when I came out in 2010.
I came out at around 42 or 43, but that was after a journey through a seminary to get a theology degree, in the hopes that if I got closer to God, that God would cure me of being gay. It included a journey through an ex-gay ministry, a reparative therapy situation for 7 years, where I became an international speaker, speaking all over the world about how God wants to heal us of our deepest shame and how being gay was part of that. That one particular shift remains probably the seminal shift in my life, where this obsession with being someone whom God didn't hate shifted to a small understanding that perhaps the God I was worshiping actually loved who he had created me to be.
I think coming out trans is different in the sense that you really can't do it gradually. In that sense, it's all one big gulp that you come out to people, I'm trans. And the only thing that I think you can actually hold off on is maybe the day that you start dressing full time and presenting in a completely different way. So coming out trans is just a lot more in your face than coming out gay or lesbian, because you're not going to look the same tomorrow. And there's a certain amount of loss that you think that you're inflicting on the people that love you, that they're losing a person that they had counted on for so long, even though you're actually just being more yourself. It's interesting the way that people look at that as a form of loss. So I think it's just different. And trans coming out, particularly, I can tell you that coming out as a transgender lawyer in the trial courts, which is a large community of people, sort of like going to the university every day. There's a large crowd of people around you, and when you look that different, believe me, it is a somewhat stunning sight for a lot of people, and it definitely gets a lot more attention than if you tell somebody that, by the way, I'm gay. It's interesting to be trans in that sense too, because once I transitioned, I turned not only transgender, but lesbian. All of a sudden, the people that I loved were different from at least the norm. And so I actually achieved a couple different coming outs. I came out in the trial courts. There had never been a transgender trial lawyer in any place in California that I'd ever heard about, certainly. Still aren't too many. But once I did come out, a couple of district attorneys came out as trans. And they both told me that they couldn't have done it without me coming out there and doing this thing and just being all by myself. So it at least helped a couple folks. And I think it continues to. I mean, just in terms of being a person who's an activist, you're out there trying to do good things out in the community if you can. And that's the most important role modeling, that we are who we are, and we try to do good things for other people, and we try to live up to our ideals. And this is who we are. This is what part of the community we are, and we have a contribution to make. I knew
really, really early on in my life that I was gay. I never struggled with that. I never struggled knowing. And I was pretty naive. I didn't know that people struggled with it until I came out later on, because I just thought everybody felt like me, knew, but pre-adolescent, I knew. There was no question in my mind that I had same-sex attraction from really early on. And of course, the irony is that I stayed in the closet for 55 years. But the struggle was about being gay, but it wasn't I knew there was never a question in my mind.
What you're saying is that acknowledging to yourself that you were gay was the easy part. It was really about, okay, I'm gay, that's a fact. How do I now navigate society?
Exactly. So yeah, but yeah, for me internally, it was like there was no question. I couldn't deny it.
I don't think that I knew who I was. I knew that how I felt, and I felt that way from ever since I can remember. I was pretty naive. I think that I never consciously, through early teens, assigned a sexual aspect to my thoughts. I didn't know what, we didn't have the word gay. I didn't know what a homosexual was until a friend of mine called me a homosexual, and I had to look it up, and I realized, oh, maybe. And even at that, it took me a while to come to grips, because in a way I thought, oh, this is normal. I was reading books. It's like a transition. I'll change, and before you know it, I'll be liking girls. And I kept thinking to myself, as long as I'm not sexually active, I am really not gay. Okay. Well, as you grow older, that changes.
My coming out has a lot to do with my coming to terms with my feminine self. And so I have an older brother. He's 19 months older than me, and he's kind of the embodiment of testosterone. And that was really apparent. Like, he liked balls and trucks and, army men and cowboys. And then 19 months later, I come along and I like Disney princesses and shiny pretty things. And I like colors, and I like to draw and paint. And it was very, very apparent to me that when he gravitated to the things that were interesting and exciting to him, he was praised and encouraged. And when I gravitated to the things that were interesting or exciting to me, I got rebuke, humiliation, hostility, or I was ignored. And so I picked up very early that if I moved towards the things that were fascinating in terms of more akin to what a girl would like, that was the wrong thing to do, and that was the wrong person to be. And that began my process of trying to hide all that color and all those edges and all that stuff. So one of the reasons I think it took me so long to come out was coming to terms with the feminine side of myself.
Gary will verify this. Try to get rid of things that are part of them. And they spend a whole life trying to get rid of something that's just an integral part of them. And it's just something you have to give up, reclaim it, become it, own it, and go forward. It is what you are. Therefore, it can be made into a positive thing.
I want to kind of give a coming out perspective as a parent too, because as a parent, we have to come out. We have to figure out how we are going to tell the people that we love, our family around us, that our children are LGBTQ. And I'll tell you that when Aiden first came out, I think I went into the closet because I was so scared. I was ashamed of being a terrible mother, and I was really sad. But the fact was, I didn't want Aiden to feel that I was ashamed of him. And I think that prompted me to just figure out how I, as a mother, could come out. And it was a process, just like all of the people on the panel, it was a process. But, the whole idea of coming out and coming home, I don't think I could have built a home for my family without me somehow becoming visible, even in a small way, with my family. Because I think home is a place that you have to feel safe, and I wanted my child to feel safe. And I think as a home is a place that you come back to and you feel comforted. So for LGBTQ people that are out there, I just want them to know your parents are going through a process as well. And please be patient and compliment them when they say something, you know, when they do something right, because that meant all the difference to me and my husband.
Marcia, I want to add on what you just said, and I wanted to bring in what Mia said earlier. And when she said when she came out, there was, you know, her friends had, they suffered a sense of loss of the person that they thought they knew, the person they knew. And what I wanted to add is just that in coming out, it's, as you said, it's just not me, for example, coming out. There's got to be, you have to allow time to your friends and to your family. I mean, for me, for example, I've thought about coming out. I may have thought about this all my life, but for my friends and family, it's something that they're just handling it when I tell them. And so that you can either get the quick response of, don't worry, I will support you, I love you, or you can get that response of I don't know you, I reject you. But give things time, because they're processing and they're going through this just as we all had to go through. So, you know, if you love your friends and your family, give them time also.
I came out to my mother a long time ago, and you know, I've been living my life as an openly gay man for a long time. The relationship between my mother and me has been strained for a long time because, like Marcia said, the parents need time to heal and come out as well. So for the longest time, like every time we get together with relatives and friends, you know, they would ask me, Barney, you know, when are you getting married? Do you have a girlfriend? And stuff like things. Obviously, my mom has to come out to friends and relatives. It took a long time. And so our relationship became more and more distant. The conflict was the conflict of my last feature film, Baby Steps. At one point, I couldn't talk to my mom about how I felt. So I wrote the script and I gave it to her, and she read it, and for the first time, she understood what was going on inside me, the things I couldn't talk to her about. I wrote it down and she read it. So that our project brought us together and brought us closer. And so after, like, I want to say 20, 25 years later, she was finally able to talk to her friends and relatives and about me being gay and being open about it and be proud about it. So it takes time. We just have to be, you know, as gay person, as LGBTQ person, we are so impatient, right? And that goes back to what Melvin was talking about. We can't rush it for ourselves and for other people. We just need to honor that process.
Coming out to your family is always the most important thing to do. And I think particularly, I came out at 60 years old. I'm 77 now, so I'm definitely well over 50 or 40, whatever the criteria is here. But the thing about it was that he was the one I knew was going to be a problem, the second to the oldest brother. Pretty much the whole family was awkward, you could imagine. They had never heard of a transgender Japanese American person ever. So my family was sort of taken aback. But my brother said that he was completely disgusted, that for me to get out of his life, that he was never going to talk to me again, that he was not my brother. Don't ever speak to anybody in my family, my kids, my grandkids. You just keep away from everybody in my life. And I guess I said at the time, says, well, this is the last time I'm going to talk to you. I'm going to thank you because you were the rebel of the family. You were the one that taught me I didn't have to be what everybody wanted me to be. Goodbye. So I haven't spoken to him in, I guess, going on 20 years now. He's not going to give up with that. But let me just say that his kids love me. His wife loves me. He's the only one that's sort of like, kind of called it off. But I play in bands with his three sons. We've been playing music together for the last, I don't know how many years. We've been playing in bands together. So one other person I had that I wanted to share that had this, I'm a I'm a lawyer, an Asian American lawyer, and I had a friend who was a woman, a Asian American woman lawyer, and she was my friend and my ally for many years. But when I came out, it was something that she couldn't manage, and she called me out publicly about my right to call myself a woman, questioning that I have any right to do that. And there's an element of, I recognize that I didn't go through the struggles that a woman lawyer has gone through, to grow up a girl, have to go through all that discrimination and all that oppression. I got to bypass a lot of that. Let me just say that, so I can understand her resentment. But it's kind of like, from my point of view, I feel like I went through my own struggles to get to where I am. And so I don't feel at all deficient in that sense, or is that somehow, that I'm somehow, I guess, representing myself as having gone through it, something, and not been real, not been authentic. It's an issue that transgender people go through their whole lives. Spend a whole life feeling like you're this awful thing. And that once you embrace it, you realize it's just claiming who you are, and claiming your authenticity and whatever it is.
I resigned from, I was a pastor for 25, 30 years at different churches in LA, Northern California. So I resigned from my position at Christian Layman Church in Oakland, California in the spring of 2010 before I start my outing process. But all those years I stayed in the closet because I love my people and I loved ministry. I loved doing what I was doing. And I knew that, at least in the Asian American Christian community that I was in, that once I outed myself, that was the end of my career. So I stayed in the closet because, not the only reason, but certainly one of the highest priorities was I stayed in because I loved my work and I loved people. It was hard, it was painful to leave, but it was the right time. And now I'm back at Evergreen Baptist Church of Los Angeles, where Gary and I both worked in the closet, and they've rehired me as a pastoral counselor to work with them with the whole issue of same-sex marriage now at the church. They're trying to figure out a policy and procedure going forward, but they've rehired me now, knowing I'm the openly gay man, to come in and help. And so it's a point of redemption, and definitely a point of healing. I'm grateful. There was so much. Yes, there was a lot of pain involved with all the leaving, but sort of, again, it's wonderful to be in a place now where people want who I am, all of who I am, and which is a great gift.
My clients were the second most important community next to my family. They were my responsibility. Next to my family, in many ways, my clients are more important than my family. So while I was doing death penalty litigation, I felt like I couldn't come out because I've got these people relying upon me. Their lives are on the line. And I felt that if I transitioned, that I would somehow disadvantage them in the trial ahead in terms of switching over. However, so I had to come out anyway. I mean, I still had a death penalty case when I finally decided I got to come out now. Regardless of who gets hurt in many ways, and I felt like I had to do it. But I came out to my clients, and I was amazed. I basically told them, listen, I'm going to change my gender. I know this is a bait and switch. I know that I came on as a male and you're going to get a female. So if you can't manage this, I know some of the best lawyers in LA. You'll be better taken care of than anything if you can't manage staying with me. And then they all stayed with me. Every single one of them. I went to each one of them individually. And I have to say, none of them they were all surprised. Let me just say that. But they all said kind of the same thing. Why would I want somebody else besides you? And I was moved to tears from how little I had expected from them, honestly, from the lawyers, the cops, the judges, from everybody, I was moved to tears by how little I had expected from them.
You know, I never thought about love or ending up with somebody. That was kind of like beyond the parameters that were available to me. But I was lucky enough to find somebody, and we bought a house together. And then it was really good. And then about 2 years later, he was diagnosed with AIDS. And at that time in the 80s, it was a death sentence. It was more than a death sentence. It was, you were treated like a pariah. We knew what was going to happen, and he passed away. And then at that time, I told the people at work, and I told my family that, you know, my partner of like 13 years had passed away. And then that was the first time that I basically publicly came out. And that was pretty good. I mean, what was nice was I got a lot of support from my family, and have ever since. And I had got a lot of support and understanding from the people at work. So, you know, it was a really difficult time in my life, but again, there were good points. I mean, there were memories that I'll never forget. But that was a struggle for those 8 years.
One of the most difficult things for me when I was thinking about coming out is that I didn't see any Japanese Americans that I knew. I didn't see anybody who was connected with the Asian American Christian community who had come out. That for Asian Americans that I knew, especially who were involved in church, a lot of people just sort of disappeared when they came out, just poof into thin air. They moved away, they went underground, they just didn't show up. And, you know, in my work as a therapist, I'm really big on the concept of mirroring, that one of the ways we arrive at our identity and a centeredness and identity is if who we are is mirrored back to us so that we recognize ourselves. And I always had an ambivalent relationship, especially with the Japanese American community, because I didn't see anybody who was out in the Japanese American. I'd go to Little Tokyo and no male couples were holding hands as far as I could tell. And it was just a really hard issue to sort of deal with. So the first time I walked into Okairi, the very first conference we had, I was ambivalent about it. I said, is this going to be like, you know, everybody's going to be acting all polite and nobody's going to really talk about what's going on? Because that was my sort of experience around Asian Americans, right? And to walk into this space, and of course there's Marcia crying at the podium, welcoming everybody with the most open heart in the world, right? And everybody falling in love with her. And then subsequently over the 2 days, everybody sort of falling in love slowly with each other and going, oh, you're my brother. Oh, you're my sister. Oh, I belong to you. And I didn't even know you were out there. And it was a revelation. I had been mirrored. I had experienced that feeling of, oh, I'm not the only one. Or Melvin and I are not the only ones. And that's why Okairi and the gatherings and these kinds of events are important, because my hope is that somebody's going to see this who's frightened and a little unsure of what's happening in their own history, and they're going to hear something that one of us says that helps them take the next step, or gives them courage, or delights them about themselves, right? So
I want to add to what Gary said. Not only do we not see like Japanese American LGBTQ people visible, we also don't see like Japanese American gay men, for example, dating Japanese American men, or Asian men dating Asian men. So like growing up, we see images of white people, and that being socialized like that way, we equate whiteness as beautiful. We never see ourselves as beautiful. We rarely see Asian American couples, 2 Asian men, 2 Asian women, things like that. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, you know, we need to empower our community to be more visible And going back to the idea of providing more role models, we need young people to see that we are here, we are beautiful, that we can date, see ourselves as beautiful. That's another visibility that we need to
Yeah, I totally hear you. I think,
Totally.
and I think this is still a thing in my generation and the younger generation still too, right? I mean, I was born and raised in Japan, and I had intense internalized racism, living in the States. I hated Japan. I wanted nothing to do with it. And I think there was a long stretch of time when I was like, Asians don't want anything to do with that. Japanese, no, right? And I think so. There is definitely a lot to unearth there too, and this conversation really I feel like is leading to one of the questions that we have in the Q&A actually, which is this question that asks, as Japanese Americans specifically, how have you approached the extra challenge of settling your racial identities while also settling your queer identity, right? So I think this is really a question about that very particular intersection of being Japanese American, and LGBTQ+.
My experience is that the Japanese American family is not very comfortable either with being LGBT or T. And certainly in Japanese America, as well as a lot of other communities, nobody wants to talk about your sexuality, unless you're straight people who seem to be able to talk about that with any kind of impunity. But you don't see gay and trans people talking about their gender identity or their trans identity, their sexual orientation. Around family, it's not considered a topic that's welcome.
Being Japanese American and knowing the legacy of Japanese Americans and the discrimination that we suffered lends itself easily to be active with LGBTQ issues also, because they are all based on race, stereotyping and that type of beliefs. And then I know that for myself in 2012, I was able to really leverage being Japanese American with the Freedom to Marry initiatives that were happening in Washington. I was asked to speak a lot as part of the People of Color initiative. I always used to like to end my talks or my presentations by saying that when this issue passes, then I will know how my grandparents felt when they were allowed to be citizens, and how my parents felt when the redress was passed, and that when the freedom of marriage is passed in Washington, then I will know that I'm a full-fledged citizen of the state, and that I would be allowed to marry, and I would hold up my engagement ring and say, the man that I love. And I think that really, I felt empowered about being able to leverage both being Japanese Americans and being a member of the LGBT community.
When I came out, I mentioned I joined the San Francisco Gay Men's Chorus. And prior to that, I had gone to Japan for the first time in my life, late in life too. And the similarities, I had the exact same experience when I got off the plane at Narita, and when I walked into the room with 300 gay men. And the first thing that happened was I said, oh my God, these people are so strange. And it was just entering two different cultures that I had never been in before. And I was like, oh, this is such a weird thing. Japan is a weird place. And these gay people are really they're pretty bizarre too. So, I mean, that was the reaction in both Narita and both at the San Francisco Gay Men's Chorus. The second reaction I had in both scenarios was, I'm home. And I knew immediately what it felt like to be a majority. All my life, I had never felt that before. And that walking in and just being there with, these are my people. And immediate, this kind of connection, I can't even explain it.
I was walking in San Francisco, it's either a year ago or 2 years ago, and I just happened to pass the LGBTQ museum, and there was an exhibit that someone had done extensive research on whether there were gay or lesbian people, especially in the internment camps. And the only thing they found, and they posted it, and I took photographs of it, were these photographs of this particular man who, you know, is with other men, and a film, a home movie that was shot in the 50s of this particular man hosting a gay party at his house. And I have to tell you, I started crying when I saw that, because it meant there were LGBTQ people in camp. They just couldn't tell their truth. But there were elders, and they existed on some level.
What is a piece of advice that you would like to give to your younger self?
Yeah, I want to tell my younger self that you are beautiful the way you are. You are beautiful.
I told, when we did the interview, I answered the question. I just said to little Melvin, you don't understand yet that you are a gift to the world. So similar to what Barney just said, I said, you will understand someday, but just to hold that in your, hold that.
Well, I would say what I said in the video was, doesn't matter what I said to my younger self, because my younger self wouldn't listen. But I'll change my answer though, because I get this from my husband every day, is no matter how bad things are, he always makes me smile and laugh. And I think that's important. I would tell myself, you know, no matter how bad things are or how you feel, try to smile and laugh.
I would tell my younger self, never stop fighting. It's worth the battle. You're worth the fight. Never give up.
I would tell my younger self that you're going to be a good mother. I'm going to cry. You're going to be a good mother. You might make mistakes, but as long as you lead with your heart and you lead with love, then you're going to find your way. Oh, thank you, Pia.
I would tell my younger self that through the fear you will find love. Love of family, love of community, love of another man. That don't despair, that love is in your future, even though you don't feel it now. And that's the plan. It will go as planned. It doesn't matter what obstacles get thrown in your way. Love will be your legacy, both what you give to the world and what you are working in your heart to be able to receive.